Well, hi everyone. Welcome to Living Healthy List. I'm Denise Stiegel. I am the CEO and curator here at livinghealthylist.com. And I am really excited to introduce my guest speaker today. Her name is Jennifer Maynard. She is the CEO and founder of Nutrition for Longevity, a company that takes the guesswork out of eating healthy. And we're all about eating healthy here at Living Healthy List. She's passionate for clean foods and sustainable farming, and she uses an ancient approach to the foods that she grows and the dishes that she creates. So I'm really excited to welcome Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you and your audience. Living healthy is obviously our goal, so I'm happy to be here with that as a priority.
Perfect. Yes, and both of what you do and what I do really mesh well. So I think this is going to be a great interview and just absolutely wonderful information for our audience, for your audience, and for everybody that we can touch. And truly, I think it's about education and information. So tell me a little bit about you and how you got involved in all of this.
Okay. I think it all started, I was born and raised on a homestead in Alaska. I grew up in a 20-foot by 20-foot cabin with no running water and just a wood burning stove. So kind of very, primitive living. And a lot of people, I kind of joke, I'll show them a picture and they're like, wow, you started with nothing. And I think it's kind of a funny view because I actually think in that sense, I grew up with everything. I grew up completely connected to nature and using food as medicine and foraging and growing my own food. So it gave me this deep appreciation for nature and how much when you work with nature, it can actually help you and it can help your health. So I lived that philosophy for my entire childhood. When I was a little bit older, my uncle died of AIDS, and that gave me a very different perspective. So he ate very healthy and he did all the things that I did, and he still obviously suffered from this illness. So I ended up moving into the healthcare field because I felt like at that time, this is the 80s when it was a totally new thing, everyone was terrified of it, and there was no standard of care. And I was extremely frustrated that I couldn't do anything to help this amazing person. And so I actually moved into biotechnology, which completely surprises people when I say that, but I felt like we needed to make more progress in modern medicine to help with illnesses like this. So I actually spent 20 years in that field, working with hemophilia, HIV, AIDS, things like that, where you can't just eat healthy food or take herbs and things. You really do need modern medicine. And through that experience, I saw the complete opposite side of things. And I saw also how we struggle to bring those two together. You know, when I go to herbal medicine classes, when I was in the pharmaceutical arena, they're like, that's voodoo. Why are you doing that? And then if I'd go to the herbal medicine class, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you work for this horrible company. And there was never this interface of how do we bring this together into a true holistic approach. And so I did that for 20 years, but then I felt like, wow, this is too extreme on the one side. We're spending over 80% of our time and energy as a healthcare industry on the pill and the injection. And we're completely missing this other side of things, which is food as medicine and lifestyle medicine. So I wanted to do something different that tried to really bring that together and bring back my roots, which is the holistic side, but also the knowledge of science and modern medicine. You know, how do you truly bring that together and have doctors start working with food companies to really do something real with this that's science-based, so people can understand it and understand what's happening in your body. So that's what I do now. So I left that career. I first started with a farm. So I wanted to start with the food as the first priority, and actually the soil and the regeneration of the soil, bring our farm back to life, and then grow incredibly healthy food, and then work with the best science available of how you combine that food and curate that food into something really healthy for the body. And that's where I launched first the agriculture side, Greater Greens, which is a regenerative farming operation. And then we launched Nutrition for Longevity to actually curate that into ready to eat meals for people. So we take a lot of the guesswork out of eating healthy. yeah, so that's kind of my background and my journey. It's been a little bit all over. I've lived in multiple countries and observed how their healthcare systems work and how their food systems work. And I'm just trying to bring all that knowledge together to help create a healthy food system and a healthy healthcare system that's environmentally sustainable and financially sustainable, because a lot of people don't realize if we continue down our path also with healthcare being a priority of pills and injections, we can't afford it as a country. It will bankrupt our country. So there's a lot of lower cost solutions that I personally believe can be more effective. So that's my philosophy of flipping that 80-20, focusing more 80% on lifestyle and nutrition. And really there is a need for modern medicine in areas, like I said, specialty medicine areas, but those should be more truly specialty and not the standard. Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying, because even in my household, so my husband is a kidney pancreas transplant surgeon and immunologist. So, you know, we talk food and diabetes and obesity in our house all the time. And from what I do and what he does, you know, we're really on two ends of the spectrum, where we're at Living Healthy List, we're really focusing on, you know, giving people the information and the education to find that healthy lifestyle that works for them. Because we know one thing, you know, one size doesn't fit all. So that's, you know, that's really my piece. And of course, there's always people who are, you know, a little bit too far gone and need that, like you said, that medicine, need that specialization. But I think if we can kind of make that, you know, the two ends of the spectrum, if we can bring it in a little closer, that you're right, we can definitely bring this country, we can make our country healthier again.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about the sustainable farming, and I think a lot of people, we think we know what that means, but tell us what it really means.
All right, I'll tell you what it means for me, because people are going to hear a lot more about regenerative farming. There's a great documentary that just got released on Netflix called Kiss the Ground. It talks about this. But there's already different definitions of what that is. For me, it's all about regenerating the soil and the soil microbiome. Our soil is completely depleted in the U.S. It's closer to dirt than soil, and there's a big difference between the two. So I like to explain it to people. Your soil should be like a sponge, and that's soil organic matter is the most important thing. When we talk about regenerating soil, it's all about soil organic matter. So in the U.S., that used to be at about 11% on our farmland. It's now at less than 1%. So our sponge is this dried out sponge that's not doing much anymore. So what we try to do on our farm is build up this soil organic matter, which is this incredible matrix, and it does a lot of things. It creates this matrix that our soil microbiome can thrive on. So it allows the fungi to create this incredible matrix, and then the nodes of the fungi allow bacteria to grow on them. And it creates almost this neural network within the soil that bacteria and fungi and all the microorganisms can communicate with the plant. It essentially is the plant's immune system, so it's really important. So that's the first thing that we focus on. And then also that matrix, like a sponge, holds in water. So every 1% that we increase, we can hold up to 160,000 gallons more water per acre. So if you think about our farmland, millions and millions of acres of farmland, and we could save 160,000 gallons of water, we could really eliminate a lot of our drought situation and shortages of water, fresh water especially, because a good share of fresh water does go to agriculture. So we help with the water retention, which is really important. And then the other piece is carbon sequestration. We've lost 2/3 of our carbon stores. It's now atmospheric carbon. It should be back in our soil. It's actually been identified as the most effective way we could actually start reversing climate change is through changing our agriculture practices. So we actually use our practices with building up this soil matrix to bring that carbon back into the soil instead of the atmosphere. So we actually sequester carbon on our farm. And that's really important because we're creating this incredibly healthy food that's nutrient rich because you have a healthy soil microbiome, but they're also, one of the best things they do is get that soil carbon cycle going for us where we sequester it and then it's usable in the soil. So that's kind of, I would say, a good side effect of it. So we really can hit a lot of different spectrums. So that's important for us. And we do things, they're very basic things if you model Mother Nature. So if you look at almost every different type of area of plants, whether it's forest or even a desert tundra, Mother Nature is always trying to keep the ground covered. And that's because our soil is very precious and it's very delicate. So you want to keep that ground soil covered so it protects it from UV, it retains water, all those different things. So we're always trying to keep our ground covered. We also don't till. So tillage is actually, even the USDA has said tillage is probably the most destructive thing that we ever created because it completely breaks up our soil organic matter. So we cut beds in our farm. So we do all raised bed vegetable crop production. Once those beds are cut, we try to never touch them again with tillage. So we can allow that soil microbiome to really grow and thrive and to continue to build layers of it. And then we use a lot of composting. So we're adding nutrients back into the soil and creating a full cycle. So everything we do on the farm, we're trying to rebuild, again, that soil microbiome. So that's, to me, regenerative farming. The other side of it for us is we do a lot of perennial hedgerows and pollinator habitats. We've lost, in the world, 80% of our insect biomass. You look at food cycles, that's really scary. And what's happening, especially on farms, and it's being quite devastating, is our invasive species of insects are starting to outnumber our native species. So you're having things like monarch butterflies, native bumblebees, really starting to decline in their numbers, which for a farm can be really devastating. So we set area aside that's just for native habitats for our pollinators. And that helps us because we don't use any synthetic chemicals in our farm, no pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, none of that. And we need those native insects to help combat the invasive species. And when you get a good ecosystem on a farm, which is what regenerative farming is all about, is getting that cycle back within your farm, you start to cut down on those invasive species. You don't need all those chemicals. If you're not using regenerative farming, you kind of can't survive without those chemicals because your crops are so, they don't have an immune system for themselves. So you have to create that through synthetic means. So that's what that's when I think of regenerative farming and our definition on our farm, that's what it's all about, is rebuilding soil, rebuilding the native habitat.
Mm-hmm. So interestingly, when you talk native habitat, I live on 3.5 acres in Minnesota, and I would say I think we have 2.5 acres that is prairie grass, so natural plants that really belong here. And it's interesting. I mean, you can. I'm 5 foot tall. You can lose me some days in the grass because some of these plants are 6 and 7 foot tall. But I have noticed there are some years when we've cut it back a bit, where we don't see the butterflies. In the last 2 years, we've really kind of let it just grow and do its thing. And this year, like you mentioned, the monarch butterflies, they were everywhere. So
Yeah.
I would not have put those two together had you not mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you create these overwintering habitats that protect them. I mean, monarchs are a migratory insect, but most insects are more going to try to find a safe place to lay their eggs and then restart the cycle. So it's really important. And the thing with prairie grasses, because they're just disappearing, everyone wants these beautiful lawns. So I really am impressed that you're doing that, because the environmental side of that is incredible. Like you said, you can get lost in the 5 foot tall grass, but what's happening with prairie grass that's incredible is it's growing a 5 foot root base below your feet, and that's sequestering carbon. It's actually one of the better things. I always thought grass is worthless, it's not doing anything for carbon, but when you allow prairie grass to grow up and the root system to go down, it's sequestering water, it's sequestering carbon. So it's incredible, and it's creating those native habitats. So you're essentially doing, you may not be growing a crop, but you're essentially regenerating your soil, which is awesome. So thank you for doing that. If more people did that, it would be just incredible.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful. It can be really beautiful. And I think that's something that you said, everybody wants these beautiful manicured lawns and this a certain look. And this is not that.
Yeah. But it's beautiful. I mean, nature is beautiful if you let it do its thing. And it's, again, it's hard transitioning because you have this point of it being out of whack a little bit. But when you allow nature to hit its equilibrium, it's incredibly beautiful, and you start having all those birds and insects just starting to thrive. You hear the peeper frogs, you just listen and you can hear nature all around you. And that's incredible. It's very therapeutic in itself.
It is, it is. So we're talking about this, and I'm thinking, we talk about nutrition of the soil. So obviously, if we have nutritious soil, we have nutritious plants. So if you would tell us about nutrition for longevity and the nutrition, and really all about what nutrition for longevity is.
Okay, so yeah, so we started with the farm. So we believe that the soil microbiome is really important because it creates the nutrient exchange for the plant. So not only is it the immune system, but that immune system is also creating nutrients in the plant. So what plants do when they try to defend themselves against insects or drought or something like that is they create phytonutrients, and they do that with their soil microbiome. So phytonutrients, obviously, we're hearing that more in the nutrition space, superfoods, things like that. All of those it's all about phytonutrients, which are the natural chemicals that plants create when they're basically creating an immune response to something. So if they're, and what's incredible, I mean, bacteria have been around our planet 3.5 billion years, so a lot longer than we have. And they pass down basically this ancestral knowledge. So they've probably been through drought many, many times, and they can communicate to that plant, this is what you need to do to get through this. And so the plant will actually change how it even expresses its genes. It may be a plant that naturally has, 1 foot root base and mainly a taproot. It may, because of a drought condition coming, send out more lateral fibers, more fine root fibers, so it can actually absorb more water. Its soil microorganisms are what are communicating to the plant to do that, and it's allowing it to cope with that. And usually, again, it's through phytochemical signals. So now, if you eat that plant, you're bringing a lot of more phytochemicals into your body, and that's helping your gut microbiome. So it's feeding your gut. And then plants in general, only 1 in 10 people in the U.S. get enough fruits and vegetables. And we know that that's what's feeding our gut microbiome. A lot of that fiber that comes with that. We have a very, the standard American diet is lacking a lot of fiber. So we need fiber to feed then our own gut microbiome, and we need phytonutrients. We know that those two things really help our gut microbiome to also turn those nutrients into something usable for the human body. So that's the second microbiome we focus on. First, the soil microbiome, then putting these plants into the right configuration, because also macros are really important for us. We have very precise macros that are based on the longevity diet, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then again, making sure that they're very rich in phytonutrients. Some of our plants, just in general, studies have shown have lost up to 250% of the phytonutrients they used to have in them. So all these micronutrients that you don't see on nutritional facts labels, but are extremely important. So when we revive the soil, we're starting to bring that nutrient back. And we use some very special practices on our farm also with remineralization from our aquaponics farm, where we're bringing a lot more minerals back into the soil as well, because that's a big issue. So the micronutrients, phytonutrients, minerals, those are all things that we try to really make sure are thriving in our soil and coming into the food, and then that's feeding our bodies. So that's a really important point of the origin of the food. And then the combination of the food, I worked off of the longevity diet, partnered with Dr. Walter Longo to be able to use that diet, because I truly believe it's one of the best balanced diets out there. And it's not, I don't even like the word diet, because it's really a lifestyle. And what he did is he researched the science of all of the longevity regions of the world. So these are places where people live not just longer, but they live healthier longer. So very little chronic illness. And what he identified is all these regions pretty much have the exact same macro levels, and they all also use regenerative farming practices. So they're having this nutrient-rich food that's kind of modeling nature if it was just grown in a native state. And then they're combining it with things like legumes. So every region eats at least a half cup of legumes a day. So they get almost a very similar protein source. And then having a lot of plant-based nutrition. So a lot of fiber and fruits and vegetables and healthy grains. So we are gluten-free just because there's so many issues with that in the US, but we still have healthy grains in our diet because that also provides a lot of nutrients and fiber. So that macro combination is really important, and even a lot of education of when you should eat. So Longo's research is focused on fasting cycles and feeding cycles. So our partner El Nutra, they do the fasting side of it, we do the feeding side of it, and we focus on how do we create the healthiest people possible as long as possible. So our goal is that everyone has the opportunity to eat like a centenarian, which are people that live past 100.
So that's kind of a question about that. So of course, most of us know, the research from blue zones, and I'm assuming that they're similar to what Dr. Longo has been studying.
Yes. So Dr. Longo, Dan Buettner, these are kind of these golden zones that have been researched because they're known, like Sardinia, Calabria, Italy. They're well known for having centenarians and multiple centenarians. So it's all about the concentration of centenarians. And, that was basically the research is blue because the scientist that was researching those areas was marking them blue on the map. And so that became blue zones. So it's the same concept of these longevity regions where people live longer, healthier. And Dr. Longo just did the research behind it. What exactly is allowing them to live longer, healthier, void of a lot of chronic illness? So he did the really detailed science behind it with studies on, a lot of them also routinely do fasting. So they'd either do it for religious reasons or just pass down through generation. And they've noticed that promotes a lot of health and benefit for them. So Dr. Longo will then research what at a cellular level is happening that's allowing them to have that regeneration and live longer. So fasting is a key component of it, and he's developed multiple regimens to be able to do that are in his book. And then the food is the other one, when they are eating, what are they eating and in what ratios? So he can, because there's so many myths about what is the healthiest way to eat. So, and it's different, it's very individualized. So there's not one perfect way, but this is one thing that seems to be working because these are very different regions. You may have a region in Italy and a region of Greece. You could say, okay, they're both eating roughly a Mediterranean diet. But then you have Nicoya, Costa Rica, which is eating a completely different diet. But if you look again at the macros and the foundation of that, they're very, very similar. So that's where he looked at the similarities and really broke it down to that macro level and then to a scientific level, what exactly, again, at a cellular metabolic level, what's even happening. So we use that science to kind of fuel and feed our program, which is then we curate these with chefs and registered dietitians into actual meal kits. So for us, I feel like it's so hard this day and age. It shouldn't be, but I feel like it's really hard to eat healthy. So we're just trying to make it easier for people to, I guess, comply with a healthy diet and get in the fruits and vegetables and fiber that they need daily into their system.
I agree. It is one of those things that on the one hand, we have farmers markets and we have places like Whole Foods that are focusing on better foods, better quality foods, yet we're not healthy as a society. We're getting sicker as a society. So on the one hand, it should be so much easier to eat well and live healthy, yet we're not. So I'm really excited that your program really is science-based. We really want to make sure that we're giving people that unbiased, that scientific information when it's available, because there's not for everything, there's not a scientific research study for everything. But this, I think, is so important because when it comes to diet, like you said, one size doesn't fit all, doesn't work for everyone. But this is something, like you said, it's a lifestyle. And I know earlier you mentioned lifestyle medicine, lifestyle as medicine. And I think this is such a great way for people to, like you said, take the guesswork out of eating healthy. So tell us a little bit more about the kits and how that works.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we try to do a very high amount of fruits and vegetables and fiber. We get well above the 6 servings of fruits and vegetables per day that's recommended. So people, if they get our full day of meals, they know that they're getting all of that, plus over 25 grams of fiber. So fiber is so healthy for your gut microbiome to just help it thrive. It is basically food for your gut microbiome because you can't digest most of it without your microbiome. But that's food for them. So we really balance it with a lot of fruits, vegetables, fiber, and then healthy grains. And then we we don't have really any refined sugars in the diet. And that's two of the things that Dr. Longo did break down that were really important, is the impacts that sugar and too much protein have on your longevity. So we know that those things actually accelerate now your aging process, which I think surprises a lot of people, but we know that there's a lot linked to sugar. And sugar, I think, is probably one of the most overused things in the American diet. It's in everything. We encourage people to do true sugar elimination diets so they can actually start reading labels and seeing how much sugar is in almost everything. So your salad dressing, your condiments, I mean, so many things are just loaded with sugar that you wouldn't expect. So people are like, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating a salad, I don't understand, I'm not losing weight, I'm not feeling healthier. And I'm like, well, did you look at your salad dressing, and did you look at what you're putting on your salad? Because it might be countering a lot of those health benefits of the vegetables. So we try to create incredible ingredients without all the sugar and salt and fat, and making sure we do have fat, but it's healthy fat. We use a lot of olive oil from a centenarian region. We use a lot of healthy fat, nuts, things like that. And salt, we don't put a lot of salt, but we use a lot of herbs. So you still have a great flavor, but we're trying to not put, what they say the three addictive foods are that all restaurants and most food put in them because it has you coming back for more, is usually sugar, fat, and salt. So we make sure that you're getting healthy sources of those. You do have fruits, so there is sugar in our diet, but it's natural sources of sugar. So at least you're not having that refined process, which are usually the more addictive forms of it. So that's what we try to do, is, again, break it down at a macro level, but there's certain rules also about what ingredients. It's not just about the macros, it's about what forms of those macros are entering your body that help break the insulin cycle, because we have a lot of issues with insulin resistance in the U.S. And we now know that that's contributing to weight gain as well, because if we're building up too much insulin in the body, it's blocking our leptin, which is what tells our body that we should stop eating. So we overeat and overindulge. So our mission is to really break that cycle for people, that they can start eating healthy food. And we'll have people that start the diet that are like, I don't know, I don't like kale, I don't like a lot of vegetables. And we'll say, give it a month, because you will change your taste buds even every 2 weeks, completely regenerate. And we're like, you will completely appreciate this food. Initially you're going to want that salt, you're going to want that sugar, but by the end of it, if you eat now some of those cookies, packaged cookies that may be your favorite thing right now, but you eat those in a month after really eating this food, they will be so overly sweet, you won't even want them. So it's a lot of our program is also retraining your taste buds, retraining your cravings, and getting your body in a natural rhythm that it wants these foods. So I'll have people, I always ask them at the end of 30 days of people that I know that do it, do you like kale now? And they're like, I actually do like kale. So it's kind of my joke that I make with everyone, but it really is. We see a dramatic change, and we really see that people start to see that shift. And people say, I feel good when I'm eating this food. And I think it's because it's really clean. And even some of the diets out there that are called cleanse diets or elimination diets, we actually fit a lot of those diets just with our normal menu, because we just don't have a lot of those additives and fillers and sugars and things like that. So it really, for a lot of people, is really, allowing their body to kind of cleanse with whole foods and whole plant-based foods. So our diet's also very plant forward. We offer pescatarian, which is fish and veggies, and then we offer just a full vegan option. So some people will just get it a few days a week, and then they'll eat their normal diet the rest, and they'll still start seeing a difference. They'll see that they're just naturally adding more vegetables to their normal diet, which is great, because, like I said, only 1 in 10 people are doing that enough, and it's directly linked to a lot of chronic illnesses. So we know that diets high in fruits, vegetables, and fiber can reduce your risk of cancer and heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So we're just trying to get more of that into people's bodies in a healthy way.
Absolutely amazing. Truly. And, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. November is Diabetes Awareness Month. So the fact that we have these awareness months really means that we've got a problem. And this is such an incredible solution. Nutrition for Longevity is a solution for people. And it's really easy. So I actually have meal kits that are on the way. I was hoping they'd be here before we chatted today, but we live a little bit off the grid, so things take a little bit longer to get here. And Mark and I actually, my husband Mark and I, we follow a more plant-forward diet. And it's interesting, when I started focusing more plant-based or plant-forward about 9 years ago, one, I lost weight, which was great. But what I started to notice, and I think you touched on this, is foods just tasted different. Like carrots were so incredibly sweet, where before you just kind of put them, you shredded them up, you put them in a salad just, because they're healthy, so you're supposed to put them in there. And I think that's a piece that most people don't understand is, as they're doing this, a week, 2 weeks, into a month, the changes that, it's definitely the changes in your taste bud, but I think the perception, your whole perception of food changes.
Absolutely. And that's for me, I think my biggest eye opener with that was I moved to Germany for 3 years. And when I first moved there, because they don't have high fructose corn syrup in their ketchup, just as an example. And I'm like, my kids are like, what's this ketchup? This is not normal. And so it does take a lot to shift over, because everything initially you're like, wow, this doesn't have a lot of flavor. When I moved back, it was shocking because everything was so strong and intense from a sugar standpoint. I couldn't, like, eating a piece of cake that before maybe would have been like, a little piece of cake, whatever, was like, oh my gosh, this is really, really intense. And you could even taste the chemicals in a lot of food because your taste buds were so sensitive to those natural flavors. You could almost taste anything that wasn't just a natural oil or fruit or vegetable or nut. So I appreciate that because I can taste the food that I'm eating. Like, I can taste almost every ingredient. My chef jokes because when I do taste trials, they're like, how did you know that there was, blackberry and mint in that? It was like such an underlying tone. And I was like, oh, I could totally taste it. So it gives you this incredible appreciation. You can taste almost every ingredient in your dish. And that's a joy when you actually allow yourself to build up those taste buds. You actually stop wanting junk food and fast food and things like that because they just don't taste good. You actually realize the reverse happens. Like, I ate like a fast food burger when I first moved back, and I was like, this is the most bland, horrible tasting thing I've ever had. And I think 3 years before that, I didn't eat a lot of fast food. I always thought I was really a healthy eater until I moved there. And the other eye-opening thing was their grocery stores. They only have like 2 aisles of processed food. Everything else is produce and super fresh baked goods and things that they make in their bakeries fresh that morning. And so you kind of almost have to adapt. And it was actually kind of crushing the first time I walked down and they have this kind of complete junk food aisle. And I look up at the sign and it says American food. I was like, oh gosh, that's what everyone thinks how we eat. But it really was an eye opener for me. So that's what we wanted to bring with this diet is, there are places in the world that people are just eating healthier as their standard. And we make it really hard in the U.S. 90%, I was talking to a doctor and he said 90% of our food choices when you go to the grocery store are bad choices. There's not a good, like, well, that's kind of good. It's like, no, that's actually not healthy for you. So 90% of the food choices we're putting in front of people aren't really healthy. And that's a lot. If you look at the mind side of it, the cognitive behavior side of eating, like, our mind wants to eat these foods. It's programmed to want those foods. And then when 90% of your choices aren't great choices, and our mind works against us in that sense that, well, I really want that sugar because it's super addictive, and I want that salt and I want that fat. I have a rule. I never go to the grocery store if I'm hungry because I know, like, this other side of me is going to come out and I'm going to get home and be like, who bought this stuff? Right?
I've done that.
Yeah, and we have lifestyle programs in addition that are mainly education courses that go with the foods just to help people with the cognitive behavior side as well, so they understand what's happening in their brain. Why am I wanting these foods so bad when I know they're not good for me? And we help teach them. This is kind of a trick your brain plays on you. It's the primitive brain, and it has about 15 minutes capacity to say no to something. And if you're checking your text messages and emails and all this stuff, you've completely sapped out that ability to control these food cravings. And so we're just, again, our whole food system, we've just kind of set ourselves up for failure when it comes to diets. And that's what we're trying to do, again, is change that so you get your body in a cycle and you can break those habits that, that's why a lot of diets unfortunately fail, is we don't learn the brain side of it and we don't retrain ourselves. So that's the other side as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, really, you've really encompassed all of it, really just not just here's great food, but the education piece that goes along with that, I think it's essential, because you're right. Most people you go to the supermarket and you think, oh, I'll go down this aisle. And when you think the what do they call it? The ethnic food, for lack of a better word. You look at some of those, and even some of the ethnic foods that you think are healthy, there's a jar, and you start reading what's in the jar, and that's not so healthy. But we think it is. And so I think you're right. That is such a big deal. And actually, just earlier today, I was reading an article about food labeling and just all of the tricks that food companies do. How many different terms there are for sugar. And yes, sugar is bad for us, but I think people have even poo-pooed good sugar, like sugar that's in our fruits. And they're either so averse to all sugars that they're missing that piece too.
Absolutely. And that's with my children. I let them have as much fruit as they want, and blueberries and apples. I always have lots of fruits and vegetables out that they can snack on those. I have them in front of me, because when you put those in front of you, they're gorgeous. You actually do get drawn to them, but most people hide them in the drawer in their fridge, and then they're like, oh, my kids don't eat them, so I'm not going to spend the money on blueberries. And I was like, well, I kind of put them on their plate. I always make sure I have them in front of them, and they will, definitely eat them most of the time. So, and that's another thing we really try to do, is we try to get 5 colors in every dish. So we try to really also get the spectrum of phytonutrients. So most phytonutrients manifest as color in vegetables and fruit. So it's really important also to, I think it's even a book, but I've seen articles on it, Eat the Rainbow.
Right.
And I definitely live by that. And my children, I actually, not so much with COVID going on, but I used to take them grocery shopping, and I would let them each pick out 5 colors. That was their goal of the shopping trip. You each pick out 5 colors that you want as your meals for the week, and they would pick out the most beautiful things, and they would have pride, like, that's my vegetable I picked out. So they would eat it without much hesitation, which is always fun with kids fighting the battle of eating their vegetables.
I'm sure.
So that's a rule that I kind of live by as well, and I suggest it for everyone, is try to get multiple colors on your plate. We have a very muted diet in the U.S. It's kind of beige brown.
Yeah, it is.
We need more color. We need much more color on our diet. We try to do tons of blues and purples in our diet, because it's one of the least common in the U.S., but it's very common in a lot of the longevity regions. And so that's really high phytonutrient, anthocyanins, things like that we really want to bring into our diet and feed our gut microbiome.
This is amazing. I'm so excited for you that you shared all of this great information. So tell us how people can connect with Nutrition for Longevity and what their next steps are.
Okay, wonderful. So you can reach us at nutritionforlongevity.com. So that's all spelled out. You can also follow us on social media. So we're on most of the social media platforms, and you can see our stories about our farm. We give updates. Also, our food, we just switched over to, we're trying to eliminate as much packaging as possible. So we have QR codes, and you can get more detailed nutritional facts information about the longevity region that inspired the dishes of the week. So if it's Okinawa, Japan, we'll tell a little bit about, what's so special about Okinawa, Japan, and their specific food that they put in their diet. So maybe there's purple sweet potatoes, and we'll explain what's so great about those. And then we try to do like a clip of the harvest that happened that week, because we try to harvest their food and deliver it to your door within 48 hours. So it's also really fresh. And so we like people to see, we just picked these beets out of the ground and these carrots, and because right now we have a lot of fall crops and cabbage and things like that, butternut squash, and they can kind of see that process and see the farm that it was grown on, which I think is pretty cool. So those are different ways that you can interact. And on we don't always run the lifestyle program, so that's something we usually start cohorts. We'll probably start another one in November, and those are the educational ones where we'll charge a slight amount higher, and you'll get the meal kit and the education courses, and it has workouts and yoga and meditation. We try to do everything to the lifestyle platform, so it gives people a little bit more if they want to live a full lifestyle like a centenarian. We try to build in all of the longevity pillars into that. So yeah, you can keep an eye out for that. If you get on our mailing list, we'll always update people of what's coming out. When you enter our site, you have the opportunity to enter for text message or email updates, and we'll send a lot of education. Even we do weekly emails, and those are usually education emails on all the different things that I talked about. So definitely that's probably a great way to get to know us and see what we're up to.
Absolutely. I was actually going to mention, if you go to the website, sign up for the information, which I've just in the last week or so gotten an email, and really excited about talking about you sharing nutrition for longevity with my audience. I'm just really excited that that you've taken this route and you're helping us to go to another level. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everything you do to educate your audience as well. I think it's so important that we help spread the word, because there is just so much noise and misinformation out there. So the more we can get to the facts and the science and help people, I think the better. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks again. See you, everybody.